And I would argue there's some urgency in doing that. So for the benefit of this broad audience today, Farhang, maybe you could just say a few words about ASCE4 and how a new concept transitions from new concept into a formal code guidance and how that process works.
Sure, David. I've been on ASC4 and ASC43 committee for a number of years. And these two committees are fairly active. Every 5-6 years, they update the codes. And we have to cope with the changes, new technology, new changes all the time, actually. The way it works, any new idea that comes in, it will be reviewed carefully by the committee and see what the studies has been done, what the studies and research are behind this to support this new development. And the committee, small groups in the committee may choose to also make a different independent assessment of that with respect to some of the projects they have in mind and report back to the group in a different session. So it's a process that the committee goes through to accept this new idea by, I would say, careful evaluation. And it's only then that is posted for voting. And where there are 30 committee members or so, depending on the time, and it needs to get the 2/3 approval before it's accepted and then written up in the code. So it's a rigorous process, but I have to say the ideas that have been well developed, justified, they have documentation behind them, end up being accepted. It's not that people are receptive to changes and better solutions all the time.
So just as part of this discussion, with the cadence of the operation of the ASCE4, for example, what would be a typical introduction to voting and actual assimilation in the code in terms of cycle? Would that be a year? Would that be 2 years? What would that be?
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, I'll show you my presentation for critical facilities. The process we have in place is quite different. Time history comes at the very end, actually.
Okay.
We deal with the spectra throughout the process, and then we have also a set of, I would say, stringent criteria for time history generation. So I think I've been thinking about this, and I prepared a few slides that how this new development can get into the codes and standards, and I have a few suggestions. Time history, I have to say, is going to be a bit tough, David, in my view, because like I said, most of the assessment and adequacy of ground motion are based on acceleration response spectra. Mm-hmm. And it's expected the time history to match the spectra. There are cases where we get to nonlinear analysis. You talk about the ASC 716, whether they have 7 sets or 11 sets of time history. But even there are requirements that the response spectra of this time history, or at least on the average, come back to the ASC 7 spectra. So I think it takes more than giving time history. It needs to show that the performance goal of the structure as outlined in these different codes, whether it's ASC 7 or 4 or 43, is going to be met. That performance goal is cast in concrete. And so this time history, actually, they have to measure up to meeting the performance goal. Otherwise, it's going to be a bigger battle, really, to change it.
Okay. But I guess my question on this, and we'll let you get into it a little more, is, even if the change is accepted or entertained, it's a significant time duration to get through the committee, right?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, one of the last paper Professor Alan Corner wrote, and I can send you a copy. He, there are so many criteria as to how to select the seed time history, and there are different rules set up there. But he showed in his last paper that if you just use synthetic motion, but plenty of it, you come back to the same solution as opposed to using actual recorded seed time histories. It was very interesting. But he had to use like 30 or 60, I don't remember, to show the results on the average really would be the same. So I think the simulated motion will be used, but we have to connect the dots, especially when it comes to performance goal, and show that this is still can be met, whether it's synthetic or not.
Okay, very good. Um, uh, let's see, how it seems to me that that's an opportunity for peer to think about in terms of developing a push for code implementation. I just want to
Uh,
mark that down.
I totally agree with you, and it it kind of reminds me of the peer involvement in P58. I mean, that was the research in performance-based earthquake engineering that was embraced by the community once we peer start working with ATC and FEMA to produce this 7-volume document, and we should certainly take advantage of that. A statement like what you mentioned from ASC 7, you actually see in papers. People also quote the same thing. I remember reading a paper or two of Jack Baker some years ago, who also used the same quotation from ASCE. So researchers and peer researchers are cognizant of that, but how to really make the big impact on the profession, I think it's a great opportunity for peer. And as I said, and the timing is right. I mean, there is already activities, there is uh, and I know I ask you this, there is some uniqueness also of peer getting involved into that. I mean, the synthetic records and all that has been around for a while, and other organizations are doing good work there. But there is something definitely unique about the peer community to get behind this.
Yeah, I think this is an issue that might be important to handle in a timely fashion, in my view,
Right.
if we're really serious about transitioning this into practice. So just a thought. Let's see. I wanted to give Jeff Bockheiber an opportunity to give us his thoughts, and Jeff was gracious enough to prepare a slide. And Jeff, we'd like to hear from the PG&E side. And honestly, the reason that I sort of got onto this was the dialogue that you and I had when we were talking recently about synthetic ground motors. And you said, "Yeah, but you said we've got a regulator that's looking over our shoulder." And is always, evaluating us, and getting regulatory acceptance is going to be crucial. So I'd like you to just take a few minutes and speak to that, if you would.
Sure, sounds good. Can you hear me okay, David?
Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, so you just went through some of the key elements to bring simulation into practical implementation, and Farhang had some good comments on that, and also Khalid before the break. That was a great presentation. I'm going to tee up some perspectives as an industry end user, and hopefully this will foster some discussions. A key mission of my PG&E Geosciences group is to bring new technologies in for improving our risk models. And we have been working hard to have a consistent platform where we have all of our electric system and our gas system in a single risk model. And this allows us to look at potential cross-cutting types of impacts. The better that model is, especially the hazard input to that, improves our ability to identify areas where we have a higher hazard, particular facilities where we would want to be focusing any type of mitigation or further risk assessments. We view simulation, dynamic rupture modeling, as a developing technique that's a long-term effort that we would like to bring in. It's part of our drive for continuous improvement of our models. And some particular application areas are to more accurately develop risk scenarios for emergency response, better assessment of risks so we could really focus our our efforts on areas that we should be prioritizing that have a higher risk to our system. And there has been a move more and more to have holistic type of lifeline assessments. FEMA, Cal OES are really trying to drive agencies and owners together. So rather than looking at just our own assets, really looking regionally, how are they interdependent? And I think any type of improvements to better evaluate and predict risk and impacts to the facilities will help us move towards that direction. Some focus areas for practical implementation that I brought up here are to continue the validation studies. There were some great presentations yesterday and today about efforts to do that. Integration of near surface soil nonlinearity. San Francisco Bay Area has our greatest density of both gas and electric customers and infrastructure with highly variable geology and structure, and also soft soils. And so being able to confidently bring that in as part of the process is really important for us to apply these types of models and approaches. Eventually being able to facilitate increased efficiency, laptop applications just makes this a more realistic way to apply these different approaches. You mentioned, David, regulatory acceptance. That's key for us. All of our facilities, gas, electric generation, dams fall under regulatory oversight. They have pretty old, traditional, deterministic based risk assessment approaches that they're expecting. So when we bring in new technology, we do need to compare and first educate them, bring them along, compare the results from new methods that we're applying to existing traditional types of methodology. So that's really important. I think an effort to reach out, educational outreach, and bringing in regulators to forums such as this really will help inform them and have them realize the value that could be brought by advancing approaches. I will note that FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is now really pushing owners to start to implement risk-informed decision-making. And so the doors are opening up. Like you said, David, toes are in the water. There is an opportunity, and I think there will be improved acceptance as we drive to bringing in some new approaches. So there is a way to do this. It will take some concerted effort, though. And we always are dealing with financial challenges. You know, we're a regulated utility, as is SoCal Edison, SoCal Gas. And so we need to have our budgets approved by the California Public Utility Commission. And there's always a competition with other external hazards. So right now, wildfire is huge. For PG&E, for example, that really is our highest risk. It is exponentially higher, orders of magnitude, than concerns about seismic events or seismic risk. And so that is a challenge to still keep some visibility, some efforts going towards seismic and other types of geohazard risks. Also, there's always a drop of kind of concern or awareness of earthquakes as we get further and further between significant earthquake events. What we try to do is whenever we have an earthquake that has some impact, such as Ridgecrest earthquake a couple of years ago, is to evaluate that and also bring that information in awareness. And so it is part of the discussion and continued awareness about seismic events, trying to keep promoting that. So those are a few of the points I wanted to put out there, and I'm interested in any questions you may have, if there's any areas you'd like me to drill into a little bit deeper.
Any questions or comments for Jeff? Norm, any follow-up from your standpoint and understanding the domain?
Sorry, I'm muted. Start my video. The regulators are all trying to go to risk-informed decision-making. They don't know really how to do it. So I think there is an opportunity to try to set the framework for what you want to do. In particular, this gets to how do you make regulatory decisions when there's large uncertainties in the results? And currently we use mean values, right? Mean hazard, and we charge forward. But as you go to risk-informed decision making, you need to start to look at the underlying uncertainties. So I think there'll be more on that, or more interest in it, but there has to be some, you're going to have to give the regulators some suggestions on how to do that. They're going to need help rather than just hoping they figure this out, because FERC was supposed to switch to this 7 or 8 years ago, right, to risk-informed regulations, and it's been very slow. Sometimes this needs some key retirements for these things to move forward. But I would suggest looking at this on the regulatory side from a really broad perspective of how do you give them the tools that they actually need to make good decisions.
Farhang, would you mind going through your slide set?
Sure.